It is a wild week of coverage in the NFL for Yahoo Sports because it's the scouting combine, which means all eyes are on Indianapolis, and we've got you covered on all our shows. It's time for inside coverage. You can see Jori is sitting there in Indy. She's Jori Epstein, Frank Schwab. I'm Jason Fitz. Jori, what's the vibe? Like, how are we feeling there? Like, Indy has become a wild, chaotic circus, let's say that, around the scouting combine. How you holding up?
Absolutely. It's the type of place where you should probably allow a few extra minutes to walk where you want to go, because let me tell you, you are going to run into people. They are going to be helpful. Their sources. I'll sit in a lobby. I'll get work done. And it's like, oh, this coach comes over and this scout comes over and, oh, this agent walks by. So, I mean, it's a super useful week. There's a lot of on-the-record availability, everything from coaches and general managers to players in the NFLPA. But there's also just a lot of conversations and FaceTime with people that, at least for people like Sierra and I, we have to connect with them regularly via phone throughout the year. So it's like, okay, can you just make sure to answer my call in 3 months? That's why I'm seeing you in person now. Great. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
We're not.
By the way, with Jori, you talk about that. I've covered many combines too. People don't realize, like, I think fans out there think that it's just, the college players and they're running around and stuff. When in actuality, it's an NFL convention. Like, this is
the biggest NFL convention of the year.
Everybody
in terms of people who actually work for it.
Yes. There's the NFL facilities this week are very, very empty because everybody's in Indy, including all the agents. And that's why you see so much news coming out. That's not necessarily, oh, what did this guy run in a 40? It's everybody from the NFL is there. And it makes it a very important event right before the league year starts.
Yeah, and by the way, for anyone that hasn't been to a big event in Indy, one thing I think is cool is basically tunnels underground essentially connect everything. So when you talk about being in one place, like when I've covered the college football championship out there and everything, like you're in one hotel. Like all of these people are in one or two hotels with tunnels that get you from those hotels to the stadium. So it's just a much more connective, as opposed to even New Orleans, where we just were for the Super Bowl, where everybody's sort of spread out. In Indy, you're not spread out. You're right on top of everybody. Nice. Walking around through all of it. Okay, so not spread out means that we get rumors, we get speak, we get all sorts of, we hear from everybody, and we're going to start. We got a lot to get to. We're going to get to the NFLPA report cards, of course. We're going to get to Matt Stafford because all eyes are on Stafford and the tush push. But let's start with Andrew Berry, because Browns GM Andrew Berry, I think, made some news here. I don't want to bury this. He said he sees Travis Hunter primarily as a wide receiver. Now, let's remember, Travis Hunter played corner and receiver for Colorado. We all know that. At the combine, listed as a corner. Teams seem a little split on where he is. Make no bones about it. He is seen as a difference maker on both sides of the ball. But, Jori, any shock to you to hear the Browns come out right and say, hey, he's a wide receiver to us?
Yeah, I mean, kudos for Andrew Berry to be willing to say that. I think what's interesting is Andrew Berry said if you ask him cornerback or receiver, the answer is yes. But if you ask, hey, if you're drafting him, where would you primarily play him? The answer is receiver. Now, Travis Hunter is, I think, officially labeled a DB at the combine, which doesn't mean a lot. It means that he will be with the DBs for a lot of the interview and logistical purposes, be a part of their workouts should he choose to participate. He still can participate in the receiver workouts after. That does not keep him from participating in the receiver workouts. I think, to me, when I hear that, I say, is that because you think Travis Hunter's skills project better as a receiver? Or is it because you think that it is easier to find a good cornerback? And so if you have someone who can be very good at both, you'd rather have a receiver, and it's more valuable to you in a passing league, in a league where offense is consistently helped out by all of the rules, to be able to play that guy as a receiver.
One thing that really struck me about this is that a lot of stuff you hear this week is lies, deceptions, half-truths, whatever. Andrew Berry really has no reason to lie about this. If they want Travis Hunter number 2, they're probably going to draft him number 2, right? So I think it was just an honest moment saying, yes, we view him primarily as a receiver. Like you talked about, Jori, he kind of answered it in a little bit different ways. But I think this is the only team I've seen really come out and say, we think he's a receiver. And to me, just like last college football season, Travis Hunter is the most fascinating guy in this draft, because how many times has there been, or is going to be in the rest of our lifetimes, a guy who could legitimately come to the combine and say, if I want to be a quarterback, I'm the number 1 quarterback in this class. And if I want to be a receiver, I'm the number 1 receiver in this class. Like, that is unbelievable to me. This is some Shohei Ohtani stuff at some point. So fascinated to see just how teams talk about Travis Hunter, how he works out. What Travis wants to do necessarily, we won't get the final answer until draft day when we see who drafts him. If it's Cleveland, that might be a different answer to what Travis Hunter is as an NFL player than if the Giants draft him or the Raiders draft him or whoever else. So I'm just fascinated by Travis Hunter. I think he is by far the story of this draft.
Look, guys, I want to stress here. I think people are blowing up the snap count without the nuance of what that means. Like when you talk about the number of snaps that Travis Hunter played in his last year at Colorado, it's astounding. We've never seen anything like it in history. But it's not just about snaps, it's about valuable snaps. Because the important part of this is that he truly was a very good corner and a very good wide receiver game in and game out. He truly was their number one on both sides of the ball. And every time I've talked to or heard anyone that has talked to Travis, he thinks he can do that in the NFL. And I'm kind of stepping back at this point saying, why not? None of us thought he could do it at Colorado. Are we really sure that he's just going to be one or the other with some specialty packages? I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at Deion and saying if Deion's coaching staff was smart enough to figure out how to recover his body, how to work his practice routes out, how to make sure that he was ready for everything he needed to be ready for, if Deion can do that, then my God, I'm looking at Brian Callahan, who said it's very realistic, Titans coach, that Hunter can play both ways. It's up to Callahan and the coaching staff to figure out how to make that happen. I don't think we need to limit what Travis Hunter is capable of, Jori. I think if he wants to play both ways, why the hell not give him a chance to? He's earned it.
Right. I mean, coaches and executives were answering questions often about Travis Hunter yesterday. And I believe it was Brian Callahan, definitely one of them, that said, hey, first of all, you got to just note the level of fitness and endurance that this guy has for the number of snaps he's played. It's not that he's playing a little bit of each. It's just the mass amount of volume he's playing. To me, the question is not whether Travis Hunter can succeed playing both. It's whether a coaching staff would let him. Deion Sanders played a long time ago, and I think most of these staffs are going to have something that they most prioritize. The front office will have a vision for him. The coaching staff will have a vision for him. Where is the overlap? Who's the ultimate decision maker in the building? And to me, it's like, oh, well, if I'm Brian Callahan and I'm the offensive play caller and I have these visions for him that I'm super excited about, I'm probably pulling him to receiver.
Yeah, I just think the value, kind of as Fitz talked about, the value in Travis Hunter diminishes if you just put him on one side of the ball. And I get all the reasons why, right? Like you're more susceptible to injury playing twice as many snaps. And I'm not saying he would play 100% of the snaps on each side of the ball. That's unrealistic. But the Deion connection here is really interesting because Deion put him, both ways at Colorado. And college is different than the NFL. I get that. But the last guy and the only real guy who's tried to do this in our lifetime is Deion Sanders. In '96, Deion Sanders was not a full-time receiver with the Cowboys, but enough that he got, I believe, 39 catches. Obviously was the best cornerback in football. Was basically a two-way player all year. And Deion obviously didn't think that was hard enough because he let Travis Hunter do it at Colorado. So I think a team has to be creative with Travis Hunter. That's why I want to see him go to the right spot. I do think he can play both ways in a somewhat limited basis, maybe full-time corner, 25 snaps a game at receiver, where he can make a big play or two. I think if you just say, no, you're just going to be a cornerback, well, why draft him in the top 5 then? Because I think his value diminishes at that point. To one of the things that makes Travis Hunter special is he can do both of these things and do them both at an incredibly high level.
Yeah,
I'm also curious, and you guys have been covering the league longer than I have, how much more difficult is it from a game planning standpoint to play multiple positions? I covered the Dallas Cowboys when Micah Parsons came in and was primarily in the linebackers room. And then it was like, okay, actually, we're not going to have him primarily in the linebackers room. Because, again, he was not really an edge rusher as an undergrad. Now, part of that was just how short he played at Penn State, especially given the COVID restrictions and him opting out of that last COVID year. But there was this idea of, well, why don't we have him in the D-line room and the linebackers room? Well, why don't we have a coach who's designated with making sure that whatever he missed in one position group, he's going to get from the other? But that's one side of the ball. When you're learning the same defensive game plan, you're scouting the same opponents. You just might be scouting a couple guys in the way that a guard might need to scout the edge rusher and the defensive tackle, depending on who's coming for him. It's very different to have it to scout 2 sets of 11 players in the game plans.
And my main answer to that is he's already done it. So I just wonder if this is normal to him, that he could pull it off. And we try. Look, in many ways, college and the NFL are completely different sports, but in some ways they're not. Like, I'm sure Colorado had very in-depth game planning, and Travis Hunter still pulled it off. That leads me to believe Travis Hunter's really, really adept at picking this stuff up. He's a smart guy, that he can absorb this information on both sides of the ball. So it's almost like, the Titans' new GM came out and somebody asked him, like, hey, do you think Travis Hunter can play both ways? And his answer was, well, he's already done it, so yeah, why not? And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, Jori, is can an NFL team pull this off? And my answer to that would be, well, he's kind of already done it, so why not?
I think what I would say is that at the college level, he's probably significantly better than the other guys who could otherwise be playing either of those positions for him. At the NFL, let's say you're 10% better than the other guys from a skill set standpoint versus 25%. But all of a sudden, you're going to be 14% less effective at remembering your assignments and having mental errors and missed assignments. Well, so then that calculus changes. I don't think it's so binary of can he do it, can he not? The question is, what is the coaching staff's tolerance for some of the mistakes he has if he makes them? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he comes in as completely capable. But the reason I don't think he's going to have no mental errors is because no one who's only on one side of the ball doesn't have mental errors. And so I think that's kind of what you're weighing if you're the coaching staff.
But there are two things here to me that really stand out. Number one, I don't think it's realistic for the rest of his career he's going to play both ways. But in the beginning, why not try and figure out where his best strengths lie in the league? But the other part of this, and this is, to me, always on my mind. I talked to a guy years ago when he was drafted by the Titans in his rookie year, and we were going out to dinner, and I said, how's it going? And he said, man, the hardest part of my rookie year is that as a college athlete, my whole team went from room to room together. We spent every day together. We spent every minute together. He's like, man, you get to the pros, and the minute practice is done and meetings are done, people go, they have their own lives. You got grown-ass men that have families, and they just go live normal lives while they're playing in the NFL. All right, so acknowledging that one of the biggest differences from the college game to the NFL game is that you do have more free time during the day if you want to. If Travis Hunter wants to use that free time to absorb another position, who am I to tell him not to? Like, I think we have this concept that players come into the league and they spend 20 hours a day studying tape, and I just don't think that's real. I think they spend a lot of their day at the facility, and then they spend a lot of their day watching things and learning things. Yes, they put a lot of work into it, but there are pockets of hours where guys choose to play video games. If Travis Hunter wants to spend every waking minute he has trying to learn two positions, why would a team stop him until he at least takes the chance on the field to see how that works? Maybe he's just better at breaking down information than most guys. I don't want to rule out that in his rookie year, he's playing on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I think he's just a freak. Like, I think he's just a freak as far as his physical ability and maybe his mental ability too, to be able to process all this and be able to do all of it. We've never seen anything like this. It's just, it's outrageous almost that he was able to pull this off. And again, I just think you're right. I would agree. Like, try it out, see what happens. Like, he's going to go to a team like the Browns or no offense, the Raiders, who you can live with some mistakes this way. As long as you're trying to get to a place where we figure out, oh my goodness, Travis Hunter is just one of one. He's Shohei Ohtani of football. And he could just do this. Like, this is his norm.
Frank, you better hope he doesn't end up with the Raiders. We'll be doing a live stream at the time for the draft, I'm sure. I might bring tearaway pants and just rip them off and start doing, like, naked cartwheels. I don't know.
I think we should probably all bring tearaway pants, whether or not Travis Hunter ends up with the Raiders.
I mean, that's fair.
Like, that was the best part of high school basketball, and you, like, ran out, and then before the game, you're like, wee!
I mean, like, I might get Raiders Speedo and just, woo!
Oh, goodness.
There we go.
No, we're not doing that. But I think Travis Hunter, like, there's really exciting players in the NFL. Like, I love watching Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Justin Jefferson. I think Travis Hunter might come in and be the most intriguing player in the NFL right away. Because if he could pull this off, it's just unbelievable to me. Again, I keep bringing up Ohtani, but to me, this is the equivalent of a guy who just says, yeah, I'm the best quarterback in this draft. I'm the best receiver in this draft. I can play both in the NFL. Why not? I won the Heisman Trophy doing it. Bet against me. I'm fascinated. I think he enters the NFL as one of the absolute must-watch players.
So speaking of best wide receivers, let's move on to one of the best wide receivers, if not the best in the league, Ja'Marr Chase. I thought it was interesting. All right. The Bengals executive came out. This is the quote. Duke Tobin said, he's going to end up being the number one paid non-quarterback in the league. We're there. Let's get it done. Like, flat out telling Ja'Marr, we are going to make you the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. Let's just get the deal done. Jori, like, I think this is the Bengals coming out and making a statement about spending money, making a statement about taking care of their own, and making a statement that whatever difficulty they're having getting Ja'Marr signed has nothing to do with their end of it. They will do whatever it takes. I thought this was a bold moment from the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, I believe that this is Duke Tobin, the top executive in the Cincinnati Bengals front office, coming out to Ja'Marr Chase's agent, Rocky Arsenal, who, by the way, T. Higgins switched to, and saying, hey, Rocky, we'd like to get a deal done. Come over here, please. Can we talk about this? Oh, actually, can we talk about it sooner rather than later so that we can get better defenders and upgrade our team? Because remember during last year training camp when your client held in and we thought he was going to get there and Justin Jefferson got there and CeeDee Lamb got there, but Ja'Marr Chase didn't get there. And granted, from a year ahead and all of that, like, there was a little bit of difference. It's not exact apples to apples, but I do think that there's something to be said for this. So it was shocking to me, even if we thought that that was going to be Jamar Chase's value, that Duke Tobin was coming out on the record and saying this. And oh, by the way, he's coming out and saying this about Jamar Chase at the same time as he has to pretty urgently figure out T. Higgins. Now, you could argue that he wants to get Jamar Chase done ASAP so that he can then figure out the T. Higgins thing in a timely manner. T. Higgins seems likely to be franchise tagged, especially if they don't have a long-term deal agreed to in the next couple of weeks, so that he can be on that team long-term or tagged in trade. But they're not just going to let him walk. But it's interesting. You also have to consider, how much do you believe that Jamar Chase's production reflects having T. Higgins on the other side of the ball? It's rare, though, very rare, that you have teams saying, we want this guy to be the highest non-quarterback in the league. I've had agents tell me that about, especially their edge rushers. Definitely can think of some edge rushers this offseason whose representation fully expects for them to become the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. But you don't really hear that on the agents or on the team side.
I just thought it was kind of, the Bengals saying, let's just cut through the BS. Like, sometimes there's just no reason to like lie to everybody, like the Falcons are now, saying, hey, we're totally fine if Kirk Cousins is on the roster all year. Yeah, no, we all know differently. I think the Bengals realize, of course, Jamar Chase is going to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. He's 26 years old or whatever, just won a triple crown. Let's not try to sugarcoat this. Here's an olive branch a little bit. Yeah, Jamar, we couldn't get it done last year. They should have. They screwed that up, by the way. That should have been an easy contract. It's going to cost us more money.
How do you know they screwed it up? What if they went to Jamar and offered him CeeDee Lamb money and he just didn't come to the table?
Could be. But I mean, at some point, this did cost them money, like not getting it done. Whatever Jamar Chase's number was last August, the number's higher now, right?
And here's the other possible nugget that Duke Tobin was throwing us, is that the Bengals get a lot of flack for not guaranteeing contracts much beyond the first year and not wanting to give a lot of that money up front. It's possible that Duke Tobin's saying, you will be the highest paid whenever you're going to get your money. You might not get it all now. You might not have the guarantee, but we're going to give it to you. And so that's what's kind of interesting, is he didn't say you will be the highest guarantees other than quarterbacks. I think there is a little bit of room for massaging there.
Isn't there also a moment here where the Bengals essentially, by giving Jamar Chase that kind of money, would be resetting the value of what T. Higgins is going to cost? Like, franchise tag on T. Higgins is the average of the top 5 at the position. So if you're resetting the entire value of wide receiver, you're actually going to cost yourself more money to keep T. Higgins if you're franchising him. So like, it really becomes important to me in my mind. Like, look, you need to get Jamar done so you can franchise T. But in a beautiful world, if you can get T done and not have to worry about resetting that value first, that kind of makes sense, even though it's not easy to do.
I think there's split opinion on that throughout the league, because I did talk to an NFC executive yesterday who felt like if they paid T first and gave T a certain amount of money, which, by the way, the salary cap went up more than a lot of teams expected it to this year, then you might end up having Jamar saying, well, if I thought T was here and he's here, well, then I'm up here.
Yep, could be.
That'd be wild.
It's going to be very interesting. And the fact that it's the Bengals the Bengals are notorious for this. The Bengals are notorious for not paying guys, letting guys go. So I'm interested to see, can they get those two done? And let's not forget Trey Hendrickson, who I believe finished second Defensive Player of the Year. They gotta figure something out with him too. This is a really, really interesting offseason for them.
Jori, what's the sense in Indy? Is the sense in Indy that Jamar, Trey, and T will all be Bengals next year?
I think most people I talk to expect 2 of the 3, and T seems the most likely to go. Duke Tobin was pretty strong on wanting T to stay, and he's like, as long as I'm in charge, which he's been in charge for a long time, and I expect him to, God willing, to be in charge for a long time. But I think that the reason I'm skeptical about T being there long term is there are a lot of other teams here who are very interested in his services. And I would include the Patriots in that category as a team who it's like, oh, hey, we need a receiver. Oh, a veteran receiver. Oh, Drake May can throw to that guy, and maybe he can come in and he can kind of mentor the other guys too. I mean, there are so many teams that need T. Higgins, arguably more than the Bengals, that what I wonder is, if you have 2 timelines, and one of them is the timeline in which the Bengals and T. Higgins' agent can agree on a deal, and the other is the timeline on which the Bengals potentially franchise tag him or get close to it, and then all of a sudden have other teams coming and saying, well, what if we give you these 2 draft picks in this player? What if we give you a second this year first? I don't know the exact compensation. I think that pressure is going to be pretty hard for the Bengals to pass up, because I think they will hear from more teams urgently, because I don't think there's that. I mean, he seems like, who would you rather have on the receiver market than him? I mean, Devontae Adams, maybe if he continues at his peak. I mean, Cooper Kupp should do something. I wouldn't rather have Stephon Diggs or Amari Cooper. So I think when you look at what T. Higgins is able to do, his value relative to the market is going to be really relevant in terms of how urgently other teams come after him.
Yeah, I think he's not only the number one receiver in free agency, he's number one player easily. Like, I don't, guys like T. Higgins just don't hit the open market very often. He's, I believe, 26 years old. He just had 10 touchdowns in 12 games. Like, he's a number one guy. And like you said, like a team like the Patriots will hire $30 million to spend. Like, they're just blank checking that thing. Like, what do you want? Like, you want CeeDee Lamb money? We don't care. Fine, here you go. We just want somebody to grow up with Drake May. We got the cap for it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's also all that production with relatively limited targets, because Jamar Chase was getting the share of the targets.
A lot of them up. Yep, you're right.
You're also, for a lot of other teams that have a ton of money to spend, you could be looking at it right now. I don't know, cough Raiders, and saying, hey, we could add T. Higgins and Matt Stafford. Suddenly changes our entire offense. This is where we are. All right, we'll talk about Matt Stafford. I had to get there. We'll go to Matt Stafford. Going to take a quick break. The latest on the biggest quarterback that may or may not land on another team. We'll break it down next. All right, Jori, I saw the look you gave me. I tried to put Matt Stafford, T. Higgins, and Ashton Genty together on the Raiders offense with Brock Bowers. I did all that in one sentence. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We got money to spend.
If you will it is no dream, Fitz.
Well, I'm going to start manifesting things around here. The Chiefs are not going to win, and the Raiders are. I don't know what I'm doing. Diana Rossini says Matt Stafford's exploration of his market value the last few weeks has indeed attracted significant interest from teams, most notably the Raiders and Giants, I think, which is probably a statement on the quarterback market in the draft this year as much as anything. But what's the buzz in Indy, Jori, about Matt Stafford?
What's interesting to me about Matt Stafford is, again, going back to the T. Higgins thing, who would you rather have? Yes, there are a lot of free agent quarterbacks out there, but I think Matthew Stafford, especially in the playoffs and what he just did, I was in that Philly game when a lot of the Eagles players thought that they were not going to be advancing on because of how well Matthew Stafford played in that game. And I think when you look at it, you say, would you rather have him or Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson,
Sam
I have my whole list. Sam Darnold. I'm like, I have my whole list. We'll do that. Right. Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones. I mean, all of these guys.
It's not even close. It's not even close.
It's not close. And the other thing is, like, I was on Matt Harmon's show, our fantasy show yesterday, and he was like, but what about what Stafford did in the regular season this year? And I'm like, you're not getting a quarterback to have the best stats in the regular season. Now, that's not a knock on Joe Burrow. He can do both. But you want a guy who is going to elevate his level of play in the playoffs. If we're going to bash teams like the Cowboys for going 12-5 3 years in a row and not advancing deep in the playoffs, you got to give credit to the ones who are able to advance in the playoffs and who are able to elevate their play to that regard. And I think that Matthew Stafford is far and away. Going back to your Raiders, Fitz, what's so interesting to me is Pete Carroll gets up to the podium yesterday for his first more like national, I know he talked when he was introduced, but his first more national introduction as the Raiders head coach. And he was asked about Tom Brady's influence. And I know we'd heard rumblings for a while. And then the rumblings came a little louder of like, hey, executives and coaches telling C-Rob and I and telling him, you talk to a lot of people, Fitz, like all of us, like, you know, Tom Brady's opinion is really valued. Mark Davis really listens to his opinion. Well, Pete Carroll, I thought, would downplay that, because if you don't downplay that, people are kind of asking you, well, what are you doing and what's the GM doing? And he's also not the controlling owner, so why is this guy just superseding you? Like, oh, you win 7 Super Bowls, you supersede. I guess it's not a high sample size if you go with that philosophy, but you still have to ask the question. Instead, Pete Carroll says, when asked how often he talks to Tom Brady, he said, Tom Brady is available every day. We call, we text. There are a lot of things that we can do. He's curious. He can hear these things, and he wants to hear these things. Well, if you're telling me that, and you're telling me that that line is direct to Pete Carroll too, and to John Spytek, who obviously their past history with the Bucs influenced them working together again, I got to think that Tom Brady is going to be really big on who they get. And so then I'm saying, well, who has that maniacal work ethic that Tom Brady has? Who has that elevated arm talent and arguably better arm talent than Tom Brady? I mean, no one really considered Brady to be the top arm talent, even if his body of work was leveled. To me, if I'm Tom Brady, I'm saying, let's go get Matthew Stafford.
My whole thing with the Stafford trade talks, whatever you want to call them, I don't see how this makes sense for anybody involved. I don't think the Rams are better without Matthew Stafford. What's their plan B? Like, I'd have to see their plan B to really
Sam Darnold?
Board. Yeah, I guess. Like, but But we just talked about that. Like, we'd rather have Matthew Stafford than Sam Darnold, right? Like,
Nah,
they already know
fair.
Matthew Stafford. Like you said, they almost beat the Eagles with Matthew Stafford. So I don't think the Rams are better off overpaying Sam Darnold. I don't think Stafford's better off going to, like, let's be honest. Let's be real. The teams he's going to go to, unless it's the Steelers, are non-playoff teams. What, the Raiders are going to acquire Matthew Stafford to what? Go from fourth place in the AFC West to fourth place in the AFC West? Like, wherever Matthew Stafford lands among realistic teams right here, it's not going to get him back to the playoffs. It's not going to put him in a better situation than he is with the Rams. And then you look at the team acquiring him, and if I'm the Raiders, because we're bringing them up a lot, or the Giants, okay, well, yeah, Matthew Stafford's better than what you got, but he's also 37, I believe. And yes, he played well in the playoffs. He was very inconsistent in the regular season. Maybe that's a part of the age curve right now. I just, why you're trying to get to where? If you're the Giants, you're still not going to be better than Washington or Philly with Matthew Stafford, and now you just have a 37-year-old quarterback who you've given up major assets to get. I don't see why this makes sense for anybody, the acquiring team, the Rams, or Stafford. So I don't know. I guess once you get this far down the road, it might happen. But I think at the end of the day, the Rams are going to just kind of be like, all right, you figured out your market. Here's a new contract. We're all happy, and we'll go into the 2025 season and see what we can do.
I don't believe Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, either one, if that's who you draft, are set to be starters week one. The best situation is that they don't start year one in the NFL at all. So if you're the Giants, the Browns, the Raiders, if you're any of these teams that were projecting to draft a quarterback, the best development plan for those quarterbacks is for them to not play in year one to me. So if I can sign a 37-year-old Matt Stafford, if I'm the Giants or the Raiders or one of these teams, I can still draft a quarterback, or I can punt to next year when the draft quarterback class is considered to be much better. I can worry about the assets I need to go get a quarterback next year, try and get a quarterback in that draft, and at the end, and it takes that pressure off. I can go best player available. I can let my whole board come to me if I've at least got somebody I can sell to ownership and a fan base is like, no, we've got a capable quarterback. So as much as I joke, if you're the Giants or you're the Raiders and you're a team that's just or you're the Jets, you're a team that's desperate for a quarterback, and you have an option between reaching for someone in the first round, putting him on the field week one, or you have the option of signing Matt Stafford and then figuring out the quarterback in the next 2 years, I would take that all day and twice on Sundays. It's just a better plan. I don't think there's a better option for any of these teams. Does it help you win a Super Bowl? No. But does it make your team demonstrably better? Yes, I think it does.
But what's that? But what is demonstrably better for the Giants? Let's say the Giants. Let's put them out there. They won 4 games last year, I believe. So Matthew Stafford, a 37-year-old Matthew Stafford, gets you to 7. I just don't. And then what happens in 2026? Like, I just think you need to have a better long-term plan than, well, yeah, Matthew Stafford's better week one than anybody we could have. True, but it doesn't get you where you want to go.
But Frank, what if you don't? But what if you look around and you're like, man, I don't think Cameron Shedeur's the answer. And I think that's why this is happening. I think that you've got teams looking around and saying, like, if I'm picking 4th in the draft and I need a quarterback, but I don't like either of these quarterbacks, the hell am I going to do? I'm not going to punt on next season. The
Giants would get him is because Joe Shade and Brian Daboll are going to get fired if they don't have a winning season. So just, hey, YOLO, whatever. Like, we're not going to be around to pick up the mess. Let's just get Matthew Stafford and try to save our jobs.
Is that terrible, though? Like, what's the other alternative? Your other alternative for all of these teams drafting tall or high is to either reach in the draft. If you don't believe that these quarterbacks are epic, you're reaching, and then you're probably going to get fired anyway. You're reaching and you're setting your organization back for an entire year, or you're just waiting to see if maybe, like, you want to take a flyer on a 2nd or 3rd round guy that could develop while you basically punt your entire next season. Like, that doesn't feel. I can't imagine being Shane or Daboll or in this situation Pete Carroll. Like, Pete Carroll didn't come back. He didn't come back this year to not try and win football games. He's certainly not going to run it back with Aiden O'Connell. So if he doesn't believe that Shedeur is really the answer and Matt Stafford's out there, why the hell wouldn't you explore it? It makes you better.
Yeah, the Giants are also particularly interesting to me because I think there are some teams where you say, oh, you can get someone 1 or 2, or you're a new coach and you've got a little bit of time. Brian Daboll and Joe Shane do not have time. Like, they got to figure out a quarterback solution yesterday.
But I just think I just think those types of decisions are bad for organizations, and it sets you back.
I agree.
If Matthew Stafford is free, if Matthew Stafford is a free agent, and we're talking about short-term deal, the Giants are going to overpay. I'd say, oh, what do I care? I'm not the mayor's accountant. Go pay for him. But I think once you add in also Okay, giving up some draft picks for this guy too. Like he ain't coming free that way.
What's it going to take? That's what I don't know. Like, what do we talk? If we're talking about you got to give up the 4th pick in the first round of the draft,
no, that
certainly not worth it. But Jori, is there any sense right now of what the market value for Matt Stafford will be if he's traded?
Yeah, I need to dig into that a little more because I think it's still a little bit early because it's not just about compensation and draft picks. It's also about what contract are you giving him. Like if he's not getting the contract at once, it doesn't seem like he's going anywhere because that's the number one reason he would leave is because the Rams aren't giving him that contract. So I think that's where the starting point for this conversation has to be is what value with draft picks and with salary are you getting?
Yeah, and that's I realize it's tricky. I continue to say that when you look at this year's quarterback class, I just think there's a lot of teams that they're pinned in. They got no answer. They got no answer at the most important position in sports.
Like there are some teams, I've said this 100 times this offseason already. I'll probably say it 5,000 more. We're going to look up at week 1. We'll be on the Sunday night show, Fitz, and we're going to be like, oh my goodness, can you believe that team started that dude at quarterback voluntarily in week 1? Like there's going to be a lot of teams like that.
It just sucks to be the Titans, the Browns, the Giants, the Raiders, the Jets. Those are 5 teams off the top of my head that are picking in the top 10 that need a quarterback in a year that just doesn't have a quarterback that people consensus look around and say, oh yeah, that guy's the dude. Like I say all the time, it's better to be lucky than good. Sometimes it's worse to be unlucky than bad. And that's just what's happened. Like, you were bad in a bad year to get the first overall pick, Titans. Sorry. Like, there isn't a Caleb Williams or a Drake May or Jaden Daniels. That just isn't here for you. So now all of a sudden, you're trying to figure out if you can justify Travis Henry to your fan base because there ain't no other option. Like, it just feels
don't worry
weird.
About it, Titans. You'll draft first next year, too.
Oh, my God.
I think one thing I would say is encouraging to teams being like, I don't know about this quarterback is not only did we see 4th, 5th, 6th quarterbacks drafted last year have strong rookie seasons. People did not think Bo Nix was going to be what Bo Nix was. But also the years when we're sure about quarterbacks, you have some quarterbacks who just completely bust and others who, okay, Trevor Lawrence has not had the career level that you have. So maybe you would feel better in theory if you have one of those quarterbacks who's supposed to be an automatic answer. But the inexact science of quarterbacks and the history of that inexact science will tell you that this could end up producing, like if you end up having those 2 guys hit, or even guys later drafted in that round or the second round, you could still end up having a more productive year because of how often the obvious guys don't hit.
I also think, though, that says so much about the coaching. Like, to me, Trevor Lawrence never ascended because the Jags have just jacked that up every single turn that they've had. Bo Nix is where if Bo Nix had been drafted by the Raiders last year and Antonio Pierce and that staff, Bo Nix would not be Bo Nix. He was drafted by Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos staff. So now I'm looking around and saying, okay, Kevin Stefanski certainly has the resume to earn some benefit of the doubt in quarterback development. Daboll, before he got to the Giants, has the resume that gives him some benefit of the doubt. Pete Carroll has the resume that gives him some benefit of the doubt. One of those teams is going to have to step, because I think it's as much the fault of the coaching staff and the organization as it ever is the player that Zach Wilson turns out to suck. Who knows what Zach Wilson would have been if he didn't go somewhere that had no idea how the hell to develop a quarterback.
And I also am still very curious about Justin Fields because not only has Justin Fields, in my opinion, I think he's exceeded his circumstances at both of the stops he's been at, particularly at the end of the Chicago time. And I also don't think we've seen him with a particularly talented offensive cast yet. And so if you pair him with the Malik Neighbors, if you pair him with some of these guys, what is he going to be able to do?
Is there any rumblings of where Justin Fields is going to end up that you've heard so far?
No, I mean, look, the Steelers still say the most likely is to either bring back Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. I think if you ask Mike Tomlin, he'd probably want Russell Wilson. If you ask Arthur Smith, he'd probably want Justin Fields. We saw that during the year last year. It's also possible that neither of them come back because, again, especially with Russell Wilson, he's going to be a lot more expensive because the Denver Broncos will be paying less of his salary in 2025 than they did in 2024. But I think when I look at Justin Fields and I say, well, how did the Eagles just win a Super Bowl? And I'm not saying that Justin Fields is currently the level of quarterback that Jalen Hurts is, but they obviously both have dual threat abilities. And one of the reasons that Jalen is so effective, in addition to his immense amount of talent, and I think some of it's underrated, is because when he was playing off Saquon this year and he was playing with the offensive line, having a strong running back and a dual threat quarterback, even if that quarterback's not great at it, is a whole nother level of value. So I don't know, is Breece Hall going to be able to do that if the Jets can get their offensive line in a better place? Is there another place on that list where you say, hey, you've got your running back in Kyron Williams or something like that? I don't expect him to go to the Rams, but I think some of these teams that have a running back and offensive line combo, Justin Fields can provide more value than he can in some of the other situations.
Yeah, it's just one of those organizational commitments. You have to make a commitment to run that offense like that. Okay, this is a Justin Fields offense. Like this is going to mirror his strengths and play against his weaknesses. Like we basically have to hide his weaknesses. Well, we just run this offense specifically for this guy. And some franchise probably will be willing to invest in that because what's their other option?
Speaking of running, quickly, I got to get into one other thing that's happened this week, and that's the Packers coming out and being the one team that asks for the tush push, the brotherly shove, to be made an illegal play by the NFL. Look, I hate this so much. And I'm not talking about the play. I'm talking about challenging the play. If every single team in the league could run the tush push, then okay, let's have a real conversation. Just like when extra points became such a given that they weren't interesting anymore, the league came in and changed it. That wasn't one team with extra points. That was the entire league. If every single team could run the tush push, then I would understand somebody coming in and saying this is no longer a football play. But we're a month removed from watching the Bills not be able to convert their own version of the tush push against the Chiefs. Like, instead of the Packers complaining about this play, Frank, they should be spending this time right now figuring out how to run it them damn selves. Like, my goal as a fan shouldn't be eliminate the play. My goal as a fan should be watch my favorite team and say, hey, spend the summer learning how to run the tush push. We should all have it until every single team is consistently converting 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 over and over and over again. The problem isn't the play. The problem is the rest of the league can't stop one team from doing the play, and you don't get to eliminate something just because a team executes it well.
So I'm curious if you guys saw the headlines from Nick Sirianni saying that the suggestion was insulting. Because at first I heard this and I'm like, all right, Nick, what are we insulted about? But what he was saying is that when you think about the amount of time the Eagles spend in practice, in game planning, in meetings, figuring out how to do this is not that the Eagles are getting an extra hour a week relative to what other teams have to practice and all of a sudden they're using it for that. They are taking time away from other parts of the game plan and other investments in their players or their coaches to put toward that. So the same way you got a salary cap, we also still have the same 24 hours a day. If we figure out how to get more, please let me know. I could use it. You have the same set of resources. They're choosing to allocate it this way. We shouldn't penalize someone for efficiently and effectively allocating their resources, and that's what the Philadelphia Eagles are doing.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to disagree. If this was a situation where teams were saying, oh, it's a player safety issue, or teams were whatever argument, I guess I'd at least listen, but this is just, we can't stop this, so please put a rule in against it. Like, that's it. Like, that's all there is. The one argument that made me think twice, it was brought up to me during a radio show this week. The baseball just banned the shift. And it wasn't anything wrong that the other teams did. They just figured out, okay, we can play defense this way, cut everybody's batting percentage down by 30 points or whatever it is for the pull hitters. And baseball basically just said, you didn't do anything wrong. You did this so well that you made the watchability of our game go down. We have to put in a rule against it. It's the same thing with the neutral zone trap in the NHL from way back, the old hockey hits, remember that. Or just like the defensive pass interference stuff that we've seen, come to pass. There are rules made all the time in every sport that just lend to, hey, we want to make the sport better for fans, more watchable. Look, we're all at the Super Bowl. When Jahan Dotson gets tackled at the 1 yard line and they come back and say, okay, he's down at the 1, everybody watching, all 136 million people or whatever, knew exactly what was going to happen on the next play. Jalen Hurts is going to take the tush push and get in the end zone. That's not very exciting for fans. Like, that's just it. But I don't know necessarily that it's reached a level of, hey, the watchability of the NFL is really waning because of this one play. But that is an argument for it. Again, rules are made all the time just based on the aesthetics of the game and how it is for fans to watch.
Yeah, you know what? Screw the Packers. They're the Scrooge in this one. They're the Grinch in this one. I'm going full Santa Claus. Until the whole league does it, it's not a league problem. It's a figure out how to stop it problem. All right. NFLPA report cards are out. You will be shocked at some of the teams at the top and the bottom. We'll tell you about it after we take a quick break. Okay, I love these. Players Association do report cards. This is great. You get to see teams. The players are surveyed on it, and it's everything. It's how the families are treated. It's the food. It's the facilities. It's the stadium. It's the practice. Like, it's all of it. And it's amazing to me because the top 5 teams from 5 to 1, 5 Chargers, 4 Raiders, 3 Falcons, 2 Vikings, 1 Dolphins. Some teams in there that are nowhere near the playoffs, but they're top 5. The bottom 5 teams from the 28, the Steelers, a very good team. The Jets, the Browns, the Patriots, the Cardinals, So we've got a Steelers team that's really good near the bottom, and we've got teams like the Falcons, Raiders, and Dolphins in the top. Like, this is all wild to me. But Jori, importantly here, the Jets fall from 21 to 29 in a year. That seems like a big move from the NFL Players Association, no?
What's interesting to me is that when you have these Jets players responding, one of the questions they were asking is, hey, is your owner committed to putting in resources to win? Is your owner committed to bettering the facility? Is your owner committed to creating a positive culture? And Woody Johnson was last and second to last. And players were saying, we feel like we have a leadership issue from top down. There's a culture of fear. Not only is he not trying to make things better, but to the contrary, there are some things that Woody Johnson's like, oh, you gave me 5 grades last year? Cool. Then I won't invest as much in food. I will cut the budget for food. And players notice that. Now, I don't know the exact amount of money spent, but players believe there was budget cuts. And Woody had made pretty clear that he felt like he wasn't going to get good grades anyway. So why is he investing in this? And so I think it is just interesting when you see, well, before that, the Washington Commanders had been last place 2 years in a row. And, Dan Snyder, they end up getting him out. And all of a sudden, you go from 32nd to 11th. You go massively increased. Dan Quinn is the number 1 rated head coach in the league in terms of how much players believe he is efficient with their time and he is receptive to their feedback. You see these huge gains, and yes, there's not a correlation across the board with every team and how effective they are. We saw the Chiefs ranking poorly while making it to the Super Bowl. But to me, it's not that every owner is going to have an exact parallel from on-the-field success and off-the-field investment. It's that if you have a really bad owner and you fix it, you could have a massive jump. And when the Washington Commanders did that this year and they jumped from 32 to 11, they also jumped from 4-13 to the NFC Championship. And so I think it is just a little bit naive to say that players don't care if their families have daycare, don't care if they have decent food at the facility, don't care if they have enough space in their locker rooms. Like, these things matter.
Absolutely. I love what you wrote today, Jori, in that you framed it as Josh Harris last year. They finished 32nd, and Josh Harris said, I'm not an F- guy. And what did he do? He poured money in. He made the right hires. He changed the entire perception of the Washington Commanders. Now, there's some chicken and egg stuff. Was it the winning that led to the good grades, or the good grades that led to the win? Whatever it is, Josh Harris looked at this report card and said, this is unacceptable. I got to look in the mirror and get better at this. And he did. And kudos to him. And so when we talk about somebody like Ambassador Johnson, who's having his kids give him ratings based off
Start over. Boo.
This show refuses Ambassador Johnson. Boo.
Ambassador Johnson. But I mean,
Woody Johnson or Woody.
Fine. When Woody Johnson finishes 32nd behind David Tepper, isn't that a wake-up call? Isn't that, my goodness, I got to do better at this. And this started, I think at first we were just like shaming teams or whatever. But I think what it's become is wake-up calls to these teams down in the bottom 5 of like Josh Harris with the Commanders saying, wait, I'm not an F- guy in anything I do in this life. What do I need to do to get better? You would hope that Woody Johnson, David Tepper, all these guys down at the bottom take this and say, okay, I need to pour money into facilities. I need to make the right hires. I need to get feedback from my players on what they need daycare-wise or food-wise or whatever it is that we don't think about on a daily basis. So I think this is a good thing. I think this makes every NFL owner accountable. Like, for teams, we've talked about this. All of us have talked about, what do you do as a fan when your owner just stinks? There's no way out of that. Well, this at least helps a little bit where there's some recourse of, well, yes, we're going to shame you, Woody, because you're number 32 in everything and your team stinks. You haven't made the playoffs in 14 years. Maybe there's a wake-up call to get better. And I do want to put this out there in the ether real quick, too. Every year when the finalists for Hall of Fame come out, I hear all this crying that, oh, my goodness, how is Robert Kraft not in the Hall of Fame? He needs to be in the Hall of Fame. Robert Kraft ranks among the bottom 5 owners in the NFL. Why are we putting him in the Hall of Fame? Why are we putting any owner in the Hall of Fame? Stop that nonsense. But anyway, back to the point. Yes, I think these NFLPA report cards are very important to the teams at the bottom to get their act together and get their organizations better.
Yeah, one data point that I think shows this impact so clearly is the first year they started doing this, 11 teams didn't offer daycare during the game. So again, if you have a spouse of a player or a partner of a player who wants to come watch the game, what are you going to do with your kids? By year 2, it was down to 7, and now only 3 teams do not offer daycare during the game. So that is a tangible change. And what NFLPA Chief Strategy Officer J.C. Cheddar, previously the president of the board, now he's retired, has a fancy title. I keep making fun of him for it. I will continue to do so. What he was saying is that this is not specifically get a new facility. Yes, to be clear, the Falcons got a new facility. Their grade went crazy from something like 25 to 3. They also still have some issues. That's another story. And I did have an NFC executive text me and say, we might as well call these rankings who got the new facility most recently. And there is some truth to that. There is also truth to the fact that when you look at what the Commanders did, the reason that they want to make them such an example is because the Commanders did not get a new facility. And they need some new facility upgrades. But instead they say, hey, we're going to get a new coach. We're going to change some things. We're going to have better family programming and have more options for your families. We're going to improve the food. We're going to improve the travel. And I think it was something along the lines of the bus they took when they went from DC to Baltimore, which is not that far away, but they had space. So then you're not all cramped. And considering I'm a small 5'3" human who feels cramped after a flight and my legs after a run on a flight don't feel good, I can only imagine what these guys who are 2 to 3 times my size feel when they, by the way, they need to play at a really high level and have their body at the highest level to do their jobs. So it's not unreasonable. Like, I think sometimes people might say, why do these guys need first-class seats? Why are they mad that the coaching staff is getting first-class seats? Well, maybe because if their bodies aren't in peak shape, their performance is going to drop. And in a similar situation, something that they could do, the Philadelphia Eagles, they did fine on a bunch of the rankings. But one of the things is the players said, well, we have good food in the cafeteria, but our lunchtime is the same as all the business operations. And they have a huge business operation. So imagine practicing for 2 to 3 hours. You get your lunch, but you have nowhere to sit down because like the accountants and the tax people and the consultants are in there. Well, just have them eat lunch at different times. This is a very easy fix. And so the NFLPA wants to highlight some of these things because not every fix and improvement has to be a $50 million upgrade.
I also, the first year these came out, I just worked the phones. I talked to every former or current player that I possibly could. And my question was, how much will these report cards influence your decision of where you sign at some point in your life? And that's where I started my conversation. That was the opening of my thesis, right? What I discovered is, look, money still talks. We all know that. But the most important thing when I was talking to players then, and I still talk to players now about this ranking, is it's reflective of the conversations we aren't aware of behind the scenes. And that's what I think fans need to understand. Like, this isn't just accountability to the owners. This is also the players echoing the things that they say when they're hanging out at the pass rush summit or the tight end summit, when they're talking amongst themselves in their group threads, because so many of these players are friends and have relationships, the food being bad, it being a pain in the butt. Like, these are real things that players are talking to each other about when no one's watching. And it does shape the way players feel about certain ownership groups or certain organizations. Like, when you start to have an image of what you think it's like to play for insert team name here, these player reports actually are reflective of conversations in a way that what we're getting to see now is the way players actually feel about our favorite teams. I think we have to keep that context because there's an energy behind it. It's not just, I don't like Woody, so I'm going to rake him over the coals. It's these are the things that suck about playing for these teams. And if players are talking about that and we get to see it, there's a chance for teams to come in and fix it. So I think that this is a huge benefit to all of us to see what players really think when the microphone's not on and when they're talking about their favorite, their employer.
I completely agree. And I also think some of these is you have owners saying, well, my guy didn't come tell me anything. I think it was Steelers owner Art Rooney last year who said the players hadn't come to him with his concerns. Well, one of the reasons that the PA wanted to do this is so not a single player had to fall on the sword or bear the brunt of these complaints. But even the Falcons, who credit to them for upgrading a lot of things, well, one of the things they kind of didn't seem to have the most ideal plan for was the bathroom. And so the locker room bathroom doesn't have good ventilation and it always smells bad. Well, we can fix that. We can get a little more airflow in there. We can change that up. I don't know much about the filtration system, but add a fan or two. And so I think
you think the guy who owns Home Depot would also.
Yeah, that is a fair point.
But maybe that means he can call on Home Depot, or even some places it's like they're charging $90 one team last year charged $90 a kid for per game per daycare option, and is no longer charging. I think it's the Buccaneers, but I'll have to check. And then there's another team, I think it's the 49ers, who are still charging $40 per kid per game. Well, Jed York, you can afford to pay for daycare. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. Of all, you know what? Though that gets interesting if the 49ers start to have a dip in their production, eventually, like when you're winning, nobody cares about that stuff. When you're not, everybody does. All right. That Indy is going to be the home of all of our Yahoo shows all week. I can't stress this enough. Keep with us. We've got a ton of content coming to you all across the board. Check out Yahoo Sports, wherever you get your podcasts. We've got every single show with representation there, doing a ton. We'll be back on Friday with even more on inside coverage. In the meantime, make sure you check out the articles also out on Yahoo and follow us all on social media. Thanks to everybody behind the scenes. A lot of juggling for people in different places. Our team has done an incredible job. Our bosses have done an incredible job of putting this together. We're incredibly thankful for them. And if you've listened this far, rate, review, subscribe, do the damn thing. We appreciate all the time that you give us to listen to this show. We love covering it. We don't get to do it without you guys. So thank you so much for giving us the time. Come back Friday. We will be right here again from Indy with even more insight on behalf of everybody. Have a great week. We appreciate you.